So really happy as we go on. If we kind of prompt a thought, or we say something you don't like, or you think, oh, that's interesting, I want to know more, just pop it in the chat. And what we'll do at the end, we've got a little kind of segment for questions. You can throw them all at us, good and bad, at that tail end. But feel free as we go to include them in the chat, and we'll just add them to the end. Helen's using it already to introduce herself. Yes, we really like that. We're happy that people are engaging and having a chit chat. This is an informal session, you know, so it should be fun. I'm fortunate that Tom McDonald is joining me today. So for those who don't know Tom, Tom's one of our senior net zero advisors. So he works alongside businesses, much like Mike King, who is also in the room. You'll say hello to Mike later. But Tom will be delivering the talk today. So very excited about that. So Tom will be introduced shortly. Do you just want to say hello, Tom, for the room?
Hi, everyone. Hi. I'm Tom.
Hello. Short and sweet, the way we like it. It's not going to be the case for the rest of the presentation, is it? Right, let's kick things off then. So I'll take control from you, Tom. So yeah, fantastic. Today, well, it's we've had a real proactive start to 2024, to be honest. It is something that, you know, we're 6 years away now from 2030. Time is going, and it's going quick. It's intimidating, and we're aware that you'll be feeling that too as businesses. So today's session is kind of a practical one. We've called it Light Solar Actions. It's very much based upon the kind of interventions you can take in your business. So some of it's conventional, some of it's new thinking. You may have heard of some of it before, but you know, doesn't mean the messages aren't or as any less powerful or impacting. So please give it the, you know, the thought it deserves. What I would also say though is we've also got interventions that don't require financial investment, which I think is important with the current climate. So yeah, today we're going to kind of run through what a footprint is, what opportunities we have there for your business. Taking a look at your net zero strategy. So what we always see is businesses, they get that they need to work out their carbon footprint and tackle their footprint. And when I talk about footprint, I'm of course including everything that the business does within that activity. They can do that, they get that. The problem they have is the net zero strategy. Actually, a lot of businesses don't know what to do beyond that. So they know we've created this much emissions in a year. What do we do now? Of course, beyond offsetting, what do we actually do to tackle this legitimately? We're going to have a quick fire session on some different interventions. We're not going to hammer them to death because many of you will know of them, but we've got to give them the real estate and the time because they're so important and the financial savings are so huge. Different expectations for how you could fund those projects. There's less opportunity than there used to be, but there is still opportunity. And then upcoming power hours, and we'll do a quick Q&A. So yes, throw those hard questions at us. Brilliant, okie doke. So why lower your carbon footprint? To be honest, if you don't do this, it's going to lead to massive interruption to your business and your business delivery. Our core focus in what we do here at BBF and Ngage and through NetZero MK and NetZero Books, it is about reducing carbon, but an important element that comes in tandem with that always is reduction of energy costs and reduction of costs across the business. You all know that the energy crisis now is, well, it's plateaued, but you know, it's easy to think, oh, it seems less drastic now, but actually those pressures very much exist. We are seeing a slight dip in energy costs. However, the long-term outlook for energy costs is not a good one. We know that insecurity will continue to be an issue as the decade goes on. We know that the UK is struggling greatly to onboard new technology. So all of these things have a significant impact on how the business is run. You know, we're not talking here about doing it for saving the planet, which is of course at the core, but it's also the survivability of your business. As you can see, it impacts production, transport, your supply chains. That's a real hot topic we found with businesses this year, that they're saying, well, we can control what we do, but actually what about that vertical supply chain that we have to deal with to get our products out to customers? Long-term resilience can be improved. Yes, so of course, mitigating against these energy costs, taking measures to reduce consumption it's significant. It's material savings to your business. And of course, this one is becoming, we used to say it and people say, oh, well, is it true that customers care? Yes, they genuinely and legitimately care now. So many, you go in the supermarket, so many businesses now and products, you've got it's carbon neutral written on, or they want to share with you that carbon journey. It is becoming more and more prominent. It's not just, luxury items, it's staple food products that now this is encroaching on. It's the same for, all sectors beyond food. Of course, it's delivery of all products and services. People are wanting to know, well, what is the environmental journey that comes along with this? 71% in 2023 are making purchases based upon the environmental impacts we have. I know there's some businesses in the room who very much have focused on this. That's not it, though. It's risk and reputation, of course. In the long term, we have to consider, what does our story look like? What does this narrative of our business look like? What do we want our legacy to be? If we put this off for another 5 years, we perhaps could do that. We could, SMEs certainly could do that, go and fly under the radar. But genuinely, where's the business going to be at that point? And how much work is going to have to be done to catch up with competitors? Again, this is not necessarily for the planet, but also for the bottom line and protecting future profit. And as we know, 1 in 5 SMEs have already committed to a net zero target. Sadly, I also know that 40% of businesses don't practically know what this looks like. They don't practically know how to do it. That's significant. It's 2 out of every 5 businesses do not know what approach they will take here. It's, in 6 years to 2030, the pressure's really on. Of course, revenue growth and future-proofing. This is all about resilience. I feel we all know businesses have been battered in the past 5 years. And to be honest, I don't know about other people in the room. It's hard to stay motivated and optimistic and to hope for, a brighter future. I think that's partly what we as environmentalists are in the game of. But the point still stands that this is a really difficult time for people. However, it's not a paradox that taking these steps now, putting the investment in now, whilst painful, will result in, return on investment, more efficient and streamlined approaches to work. It absolutely will give you the competitive advantage. It has to be given the time and the commitment to get those benefits. But again, I know the businesses, I'm not going to start picking them out, but there are businesses in the room who are far down this road now. They don't feel they are, but they are. They're far down this road, but they are gaining that success. And that success will only be compounded as more legislation comes in, as more regulation comes in, as prices increase, as internationally politics change, and that in turn impacts the flow of goods, services, and of course, energy, importantly. So they are the key themes, really, is why we do the carbon footprinting. Now, as I said, a lot of that. It's not new to you. Tom's going to go through the exciting part now, and that's kind of what comes next. So, yes, over to you, Tom.
Thanks, Dan. Hi, everyone. I've hopefully said a short hi, but yeah, hi, I'm Tom. So hopefully you're now all on board, if you weren't before, on the fact that you do need to reduce your carbon footprint and that lowering carbon emissions is a positive step for a business to take. So now we're going to go through some ways in which that can be done. And the first of this is to go through what a net zero reduction strategy may look like. So net zero reduction strategy will use the plan, do, check, act cycle. This can be applied to lots of different strategies for anything really, but most environmental management strategies, including reduction of carbon emissions, will implement the plan, do, check, act cycle, as this allows constant improvement as cycles are undertaken. So the first step on this stage on this cycle is the plan. So this would be establishing a baseline, finding out what your carbon emissions are. If you don't know what they are, it's going to be difficult to set a target to reduce them. and you can identify some areas for improvements. You may even want to identify some standards that are a goal for you to commit to, something like ISO 14001, PAS 2060, if you want to commit to be SME on the SME Climate Hub, or if you wanted to set a personal percentage of your emissions you wanted to reduce each year. This would be something that you would do at the plan stage. Next would be the do. So this would be undertaking the actions which you had planned to do at the plan stage. So this might be engaging with suppliers, reducing your waste streams. The intensity of this might vary each year depending on what you're wanting to do. And it could also focus on installing net zero interventions, which is what we'll be focusing on later on in this talk. Next, you have the check, which is monitoring as you're going, as well as at the end of the cycle, which is generally every year. You should be proud of the achievements at this stage, so you would work out what was successful and what wasn't. It's a good thing to be able to market yourself as a net zero organization, or an organization that's striving to be net zero on that journey. And it's also important at this stage not to shy away from errors. Everyone is constantly learning in this space, and you will make mistakes along the way, but it's important that you don't just ignore those mistakes. Mistakes are great if you can learn from them. And then the final stage will be to act and evaluate your actions. So as mentioned in the check stage, it's important to evaluate errors and then implement these into your next planning stage. And then you would revisit the planning stage and start this cycle again. So this cycle would be continuous and wouldn't really stop until you've reached net zero. And then we won't talk about this too much today, but potentially becoming becoming climate positive, where you actually reduce emissions year on year. So how can NetZero Ngage help? So NetZero Ngage can help at the planning stage. We help people to establish their footprint. We do footprinting as part of NetZero MK and NetZero Bucks. We can help at the do stage. So we can help underline actions that you might want to take. We can help you engage with your suppliers. As we'll go over today, we can help you to decide on interventions that you may want to install. We can help at the check stage. So if you've undertaken the actions maybe that we've suggested, maybe that you've come up with by yourself or with somebody else, we can monitor these with you. So this could be done using half-hourly data. This picture here is of half-hourly data, and we're happy to have a look at this for you and identify if you are reducing energy usage when you may want to be. And then we can also help at the act and review. So at the end of the year, if you want to do a second carbon footprint, and we're able to offer that for you, we can help you to review this and ensure that and calculate where you have made those savings.
So just on that, Tom, it's a really good time, I think. We've got Mike on the line, so he might just want to say hello at this point and tell us. So you're saying we can offer all this, and I think it's really important to be explicit here to everyone to say we provide all of this for free. All of this is fully funded advice, guidance, access to the carbon footprinting software, and also a year's access ongoing to that. You also get access to our team, and all of this is supported. So of course today's event is in NetZero MK, but we also have NetZero Bucks, which is why we've got businesses from across Buckinghamshire in the room. Mike, are you there? How are we looking on that front?
For Milton Keynes, we've only got 3 spots left. So if I'll put my email address in the chat. So if anybody hasn't sort of taken the first step, or is even looking to do their second or third year footprint, please just send me an email, and I'll get back to you later today or by tomorrow. And please don't be put off. As Tom said, it is the first step towards net zero is establishing what your baseline is. It's not a complicated procedure. It takes roughly half an hour, and the majority of things we'll go through are things that a business owner would know. It's things like your energy use, basically how much you're paying out on your gas and electricity, your business mileage, whether that's on trains, planes, or in your vehicles, and things like your waste, basically how much waste you're generating. But it's all really straightforward, and we'll hold your hand through the whole thing. So yeah, I'll put my email address in the chat now. If anyone wants to get in touch, let me know.
Thank you, Mike. Yeah, on NetZero Bucks, I know we've only just launched there, so we've got a healthy amount of licenses to give out an appointment slots, but certainly on MK they really got snapped up quick. 3 have become available again through as businesses weren't able to complete that journey, which, you know, of course we all know that happens. They will go quick, so if you are interested, I'd say drop Mike a private message today and just say, could we have a conversation? So there's no commitments there. You can, you know, hear the offer and take it from there. Thanks, Tom.
Thanks. So installing NetZero installations, which is the main focus of this webinar, is something that would fit within the plan and do stages. So that's what we're going to be covering today, and that's what we'll move on to now. So we're going to do a quick overview of interventions that you're able to implement within business. Not quite this quick fire. This is just a very quick. This is just a summary page. We'll be going into slightly more detail than this with the interventions. Most of these might not be, you know, the most edgy, interesting things that you can undertake. We're fully aware of that, but they are key to reducing emissions for a business. So they're important. Most of these will be applicable to all businesses. There are obviously things like equipment upgrade, which can be more specific to specific sectors. There is also potentially some controversy in here. I know people may have had, there's been issues with things like heat pumps, triple glazing, whether that's necessary for all businesses, and things like biomass boilers. There's no one size fits all, and certainly some of these things may not be applicable to everyone, especially things like heating systems where the type of building, things like that will vary as to the usefulness of those particular installations. So the first thing we're going to go over is LED lighting. I have just said no one size fits all. This might be the exception to that rule, in that if you have lighting, it's probably the case that LEDs will be able to replace that. They can be in office, as all that listed here. They can be office lighting, high bay lighting. I do mention this. I'm just listing places that you can have lighting, but we have had businesses who've approached us who weren't sure that they could replace their high bay lights with LEDs, and actually these are one of the biggest savings. You could save around 90% of the electricity for high bay lights if you're replacing large old halide lights with LED lighting. Can be absolutely huge savings because they're big lights, things like floodlights as well. People have contacted us before because they're not sure that floodlights would be applicable for LED lighting, but that they certainly are. I'm sure someone someday will come along and say actually that we couldn't do this for LED lighting, but we've not come across something as yet that an LED light couldn't be a replacement for. So lighting accounts for on average around 40% of commercial electricity use. So if you can reduce even by 10% the amount of electricity that you're using for lighting, that can have a huge impact on both your energy bills and your carbon emissions. I'd say 10% would be a low amount to reduce from LED lighting. Is usually around 50% or more of the electricity use that can be reduced from switching to fluorescent lights, halide lights, to LED lighting. They also last longer, which means you're not having to replace bulbs as often, and they're also more recyclable. So they contain fewer hazardous materials than traditional fittings. So a lot more of the bulb can be recycled. Again, waste is a huge part of carbon emissions and environmental impacts in general. If you're able to recycle elements of your bulbs, then that's far more appropriate for being a sustainable business. There's also, when you don't have these hazardous materials, you have less chance of contamination. We are aware of a business who was a food production business where a fitting was knocked out, and the contamination caused by that bulb because of the hazardous materials in there shut down production for that business. Whereas an LED light, it would be far easier to clean up any hazardous material, which wouldn't be as hazardous, that would be distributed amongst the production line. It also improves quality of life for employees, and you can have a range of cold to warm lights. So you can pick a bulb that produces the type of light that you would want for your business. These are just examples of things that you will get additional to a reduction in emissions. There are positive knock-on effects, other positive impacts that you can have from installing interventions. And the UK government is phasing out old lighting, so this will be a case of where if you don't jump now, you will be pushed. If bulbs need replacing, you have to replace the whole fitting if a LED equivalent can't be put into the current light fitting you have. And just in case people aren't aware of what a light bulb looks like, we have a nice picture of a light bulb there. So after lighting, now we're looking at heating systems. So again, this is another overview page. We'll go into some heating systems in more detail. So you've got boilers, heat pumps, infrared heating, electric heating. We'll be going over some of these in more detail. Heating, there's a wide range of variation that you could use depending on what your premises looks like. Heating is also a seasonal usage. So most businesses will not be paying direct debit, as a lot of domestic bills will be paid. So you'll get this spike in the winter. So if you're able to have an efficient heating system, not only will it reduce your carbon emissions, but you'll also reduce this seasonal spike that you'll get in billing. This can be especially difficult if businesses are paying quarterly. If they've had a big spike in January and February because of the cold weather, then they get to March, the end of March, their quarterly bill is due, and suddenly there's this huge bill that will be due from seasonal heating. 82% of employees also felt that their productivity will decline if workspaces are cold. So it's really important to keep workspaces warm. As much as it's good to keep your employees in a comfortable setting, it's also, you don't want to reduce productivity. And if you're going to be needing to heat these spaces, you want to be paying for that increase in productivity to as low a level as possible. Again, all of this will also reduce your carbon emissions, which is the main focus for being net zero. And I think I've already touched on how buildings will differ so much. That's why there's so many different types of heating system. Heating system A might work in building B, but heating system A won't work in building C. So it's important to identify what the correct type of heating system is for your specific building and your specific usage of your building. So the first and probably most widespread is boilers. So boilers, maybe some people see boilers as an archaic thing, but actually there is still the life cycle of a boiler left before planned phase outs of gas, which have moved back constantly throughout the last few years. They keep moving back when they're going to phase out gas. Over the last several years, they've moved back by 5 years at a time. And old boilers, which are say 10, 15 years old, could actually be around 20% less efficient than current models, which generally have efficiencies of over 95%. Obviously, replacing a new boiler can be expensive to do. So doing something even simple as servicing your boiler ensures that it's running correctly, that it won't break down. If you have a boiler that hasn't been serviced, then it breaks down. You may end up having to use portable electric heaters, which are incredibly energy intensive, in order to provide the warmth that you're not able to provide while your boiler is broken down. You can also insulate pipework. So generally speaking, the heat that you will come out of your boiler will not be needed directly outside the boiler. It's going to need to travel. So if you've got heat escaping at source, that's a huge amount of waste for the boiler to be generating. That's really cheap to do. You can get the foam insulation that you can wrap around the pipework, and this will prevent heat from escaping as soon as it leaves the boiler. As well as this, although at the moment natural gas is natural gas within the system, there are plans to introduce hydrogen mixes into the UK gas network. This allows a gas to burn in a way that produces less emissions for the same amount of volume. And this is something that the government has backed in December 2023, pending some final safety tests following positive trials. So maybe that if you get a new boiler, it may end up reducing the amount of emissions even in a few years' time, without actually having to change the boiler. And although natural gas is not something that it's not a clean fuel, it is a fossil fuel. But as far as fossil fuels go, natural gas is the best. I don't want to say the best of a bad bunch, but I've just said it. But it's better than things like oil or diesel or LPG. But it's not always. We understand that's not always possible. Some people will have to have these oil, diesel, and LPG boilers due to the location that they're in.
I think it's a travesty, isn't it, Tom? I think what I'm spotting with the lighting and heating that other people may find themselves is a lot of these things actually don't impact the front end of the business. They're not at all in any way related to activity there. This is energy that's being used every day in a very measurable way. So all these recommendations Tom is giving, it's easy to think with many of them, well, yeah, in a perfect world, I would do that. These result in real demonstrable reductions of energy costs. We know this. We've worked with businesses through this process. And the results are massive. Even getting your boiler service can have such a massive impact on actually the emissions you create, much like MOTs when you get your emission tests on the car. It's no different. One bad car is equal to 1,000 good cars. It's boilers are very, very similar in that regard. Sorry, Tom.
Yes. So I mentioned boilers being sort of the typical way that a lot of buildings are heated. Go over a few different options that you could take now. So one of the first options, very much in the news in recent years due to the government domestic grants to install heat pumps, are heat pumps. As there's two types, ground source and air source. There is also there are also water source heat pumps, but these usually require Environment Agency approval and usually require you to have access to a body of water. Not a huge number of businesses have their own lake or their own river. And this essentially works almost like a reverse fridge. We won't go into exactly how a heat pump works, but it uses the ambient temperature to condense gases, to evaporate and heat gases, which are then condensed, and that heat is converted into a heating system within the building. Because it uses ambient energy, they are actually over 100% efficient. So you get more heating energy out of the system than you put in. The higher the COP value, the more efficient this will be, and that will depend on the make of the make or type of heat pump, and the refrigerant gases that are used in order to do this. And many systems can also be dual heating and cooling. While it is the case that air conditioning uses a lot of energy, as we are going to continue to see increased heat over the summer, increased giant heat waves, it will be the case that air conditioning may become the norm and may become something that lots of businesses need. As much as we've mentioned that you can't have employees freezing, you also can't have employees boiling in the summer. So a lot of places will need to be installing these air conditioning systems, even if they're only used when they're absolutely required. We've also got infrared heating. So this is another alternative to a typical boiler system, especially in areas that are large roof spaces, difficult to heat. You wouldn't want to be heating a giant warehouse, the whole airspace of that with a boiler. It simply wouldn't be potentially not possible, but certainly not economical. So these can be used to provide instant heat, and it's locational heat. So these are almost like shining a light of heat on a person. It's often described as the feeling of heat that you get when you're standing in the sun. And the top image, I think it shows what many people often think of as an infrared heater, but actually most modern infrared heaters, especially that you might have in an office environment, they look like this middle picture. They're like a neat panel, and you can even have ones that are disguised in pictures that you have on the wall, so it doesn't even look like a heating piece of heating equipment. And installers for this type of technology will often generate heat maps similar to how a lighting engineer would undertake lighting plans to know where you want heating to be provided. And areas that require more heating can be given more heat. You can turn more heaters onto a specific area. If there's a production area within a warehouse, but actually the rest of the warehouse doesn't need to be warm, you can have the production area heated more by concentrating heaters on those locations. So we talked about some methods that you can use to actually heat the premises, but energy management for heating is also of vital importance. So you need to control the way in which the energy is used, and this can be as complicated as you want, also can be as simple as you want. If you have a thermostat, it's just important that that is well set, or if it's a timed thermostat. It might just be the case of planning out your week, right, seeing when you actually need the heating on, when you don't, when there's low occupancy, when people might be away. Even if you have a normal 9 to 5 working week, there might be hours in that week when actually no one's going to be in the office. So it'd be good to plan that the heating is off at that time. There's no point heating an empty space. And certain areas won't need constant heat. So if you've got there's areas that you may want to zone, the areas where the heat can be turned off, and that can all be done through zoning and through smart energy management systems. And I know we've already mentioned about pipe work, but insulation is always great on pipe work. If you are reconfiguring pipe work when you're trying to do something like zoning, it's a good time to get insulation underway. And speaking of insulation, I've got a great segue there, almost as if it was planned. We move on to building fabric. So building fabric improvements is improving the way that your building retains heat. So this is things like insulation, double glazing, or potentially triple glazing, and removing draft gaps. So you, as I mentioned, this is to retain the heat. It's great to have an efficient heating system, but you don't want to be throwing away the heat that you're making. If you could have the most perfect, efficient system for generating the heat, but if you have a building that simply doesn't contain any of the heat, you're simply going to be overproducing and wasting energy. So there's lots of different types of insulation. I won't go over every single one of those. I don't know if there's any insulation enthusiasts, but it's not the most interesting topic. And it's also something that doesn't get seen as much. Insulation is within the walls, within the ceiling. It's not something that you're going to have someone. You might have a new heating system that's interesting, or some new lights, and you can show people that. But you're not going to be ripping the walls apart to say, "Oh, look at this insulation I've got." It's not something that really gets shown off as a low carbon intervention. It's just there and it does its job. And there will be increased on that. There have been increased minimum energy requirements placed for things like windows and insulation, EPC ratings. This is all something that building fabric will help to improve.
I think just to add there, you'll notice we've got these little radar graphs at the top, those in the top right there with kind of cool factor. I have to say I disagree, Tom. I think insulation is particularly cool. The purpose of including these, beyond being goofy, is just to show you practically the kind of considerations you can make. There's no more science needed than this. We often say the solutions that suit your business, and there's a good reason for that, because what works for one business will not work for you, and we recognize that if we send you down a path you don't like, you won't continue on that journey. You can all do this with kind of interventions, and simply in an Excel, you can put across what's important to you and give them a mark out of 10. Do that for all the technologies, and actually you might think, you know what, whilst changing the lighting might have saved us more pound for pound, the staff really would benefit more from us draft proofing so that it's a warmer space. You've all got to do this and kind of decide. We can help you obviously make them decisions, but it's very much for you there to think, well, is it cool to me? I guess. Thanks, Tom.
So the stuff that we've covered so far, heating, building fabric, lighting, they generally apply to all businesses with a premises. They're sort of things that everybody can install. Things like equipment upgrades, that's going to be more specific to your business. So every business in every sector is going to have something that they do uniquely to everybody else. A retail shop is not going to need heavy manufacturing machinery, and that's that kind of thing. So there's lots of different things you could install. I know anybody who has a compressor will understand that there's a large energy requirement for compressors, and will know that familiar leaking of air that you get sometimes when compressors go wrong. Things like printing machines, compactors, which can be helped to separate waste and reduce waste being sent to landfill, ozone generators for cleaning, heat reclaimers. People who have compressors will know how much heat comes off of those, and we work with the business who installed some specialist ductwork to remove the heat from the compressors and use it to heat their employees. Any specialist machinery, generally speaking, if you're going to get an upgraded version of a machine, it should be, well, hopefully will be more energy efficient. That's often what the improvement can be for. IT equipment, again, modern machines will generally be more energy efficient than old ones. Specialist cleaning devices, we help fund cleaning for a dry ice cleaner, which replaced the need for using chemicals. And the list could go on. I'm sure we could go on for hundreds of things. But it's just important to think about when you're replacing, or if you could replace or reduce the amount of machinery that you're using, that will obviously reduce the amount of energy you use and therefore your emissions. And the final thing, once we're going to go over, will be renewable energy. So if you've reduced as much as you can the actual amount of energy that you're using, it's then helpful to try and be off grid, or to try and produce some of your own electricity or energy. It doesn't have to be limited to electricity on site. And once system's installed, the amount you pay per kilowatt hour won't vary once you've paid for the system, unlike your bills where the amount that you pay per kilowatt hour will increase. So solar, I think, is something that everybody is fully aware of. It's no longer a rare option for businesses. Lots of businesses are installing solar, and the government are really keen for commercial roof space to be utilised as a key way of generating electricity across the country. We've got wood-fired and biomass boilers. We're certainly not saying here cut down all the trees and burn them in a wood-fired boiler, but if you have offcuts from wood, or if the wood is sourced from sustainably regeneratively grown woods and forests, then it can actually become a net zero source of fuel. And also, if you're diverting waste from landfill, wood waste from landfill, it will reduce the amount of emissions that you're creating, because burning the wood is actually better than simply allowing it to decompose in landfill. And then there's also small scale wind generation. So we've helped over 1,000 projects at NetZero Ngage. And we've actually only come across one wind turbine. This is due to the high cost and planning permission you might need, but actually it could be quite a unique thing to showcase your net zero goals that you've been able to and have installed a wind turbine on site. There's also things like hydro and tidal, but we won't be going into those. They really only apply to their sort of large scale generation systems. We haven't seen any of those for businesses that we've worked with. And the very final thing is going to be these quick wins that you can undertake. So these are very low cost things like occupancy sensors, so lights can be turned off, or if you've got infrared heating can be turned off when no one's there. Smart thermostatic valves for zoning of heating, low flow taps, there's an emission associated with water usage, you can reduce the amount of water that you're using. Smart plugs, so you can turn things off remotely, or things can be turned off when they've been left on standby. Window seals, bike racks, composting bins, window film, T-urns, paperless signage, radiator reflectors, all of the, again, as with equipment, the list goes on here. There's lots of small interventions you can make with low cost that can have big impacts on the amount of energy and therefore emissions that you're using, with things like composting. It's also reducing things like waste to landfill. So now we're just look at some case studies of businesses that have installed these types of interventions and the benefits that they've seen. So we have Westies Dry Cleaners. There are dry cleaners, which for the per square foot is quite an energy intensive business. They've got machines working all the time. They had a very old inefficient steam boiler. It was around 40 years old at the time that they wanted to replace it, and they upgraded this with a new version of that. So they saved around 2.2 tons of carbon dioxide equivalent a year. To put that into context, that's actually around the same level as quite a few the complete carbon footprint of some businesses that we have worked with, and they're saving over £1,000 a year. So they're making those emission savings, reducing their footprint, but also having that's helping to reduce helping their bottom line, helping them to reduce their costs. This is a piece of equipment that they had to be using. It couldn't be the case that they just stopped using it to reduce their emissions, but they could replace it, and this meant that they could reduce their carbon emissions with a newer model. Next, we've got Buckstar Beer. They're a solar powered microbrewery at Milton Keynes. They're very environmentally minded. They have their growler swap scheme, which helps reduce waste. You can take the jugs back and they'll be reused for other people instead of generating waste. And they're solar powered, and we help them to obtain these solar panels, and they reduce their emissions by 1.7 tons of CO2 and saved over £2,000 a year on electricity. So this is a business who really does take their environmental impact into consideration. They don't add extra carbon dioxide to their beers. There really is for them, it's a selling point for their business as well as something that they care about. And our final case that we have is Clearsight Opticians. So it's family-run opticians, and in recent years, due to increased environmental awareness and the energy crisis, energy reduction really became a focus for the business, and emission reduction. And they installed several interventions: LED lighting, infrared heaters, remote thermostat, and smart plugs, all to help reduce their carbon emissions. They're actually able to reduce their annual emissions by 12 tons of carbon a year. And we've helped Clearsight to calculate their emissions twice through the NetZero MK program. I know Arif I believe, is here today. Hi Arif. I'm just wondering if you're able to give it some feedback. How did you find working with NetZero Engage? Has it been a hopefully been a positive experience for you, or if not, then but no, I don't know if Arif's still here.
Oh, if he is here. If he's talking, he might be muted.
Okay.
He doesn't obviously want to steal the spotlight from you, Tom. That must be what it is.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, speaking of stealing spotlight, I'll let you steal the spotlight now, Dan, because I know you're going to be taken back over to
yeah, fantastic,
finish
Tom. No, that really useful. And I'd say with regards to our businesses that we have supported, one thing we always like to do is shine that little spotlight on them when and where we can. There are other people in the room who know we love to do this. To be honest, we really passionately care about your journeys, the nature of the work we do. You can imagine we care about this work, and actually seeing the successes of the businesses is what really drives us, genuinely drives us, and makes us want to constantly improve on the products and services we offer you guys. And yep, so Westies Dry Cleaners, Bookstore Beer, and as you've said, Clearsight, 3 great businesses, all very different in nature, but none as less important than the other. As you say, with Clearsight Opticians, who we've got on the screen now, they're on their 2nd year of footprinting with us. They've taken so many steps across the board, yet they've not had to change their culture of their business. They've still achieved this while retaining what's important to them, but enriching it further with these key messages. Going to answer some questions in a second. It's just to wrap up here with regards to the funding opportunities. We, as many of you know, we used to have the Low Carbon Workspaces grant. It was European Regional Development Funding money, EU money effectively. It was very healthy grants of up to 50% on some occasions to help support energy saving equipment, the stuff Tom's gone through. We did that for a number of years and helped over 1,100 businesses with grants. Sadly, that money, to the most part nationally, has dried up, partly due to the current economic climate we are in, partly due to the perhaps short-term considerations politically, which are understandable given the year we are in. But whilst there may not be funding right now, these things are still just as important, and they're just as important financially, because even without a grant, many of these interventions have really strong return on investment. So Tom covered the LEDs. I think over half of our grants were for LED lightings because the return is so fantastic for those who don't have them. And this requires no extra effort. It doesn't change your processes, the way you operate your business. It's lighting. It's so simple. But, of course, there's many other interventions you can take. They do need funding. What I would say, we're not financial advisors, of course, and we appreciate, the climate at the moment is not one where people can throw swathes of cash everywhere. There are other options, of course. Many banks now do green finance. They are offering more competitive rates if it's for a green project or green spend. Further, you effectively might get approved for green funding to support green interventions where you wouldn't necessarily for more unsecured loans, that kind of thing. So it really is worth looking at the interest rate that you will be charged and then the percentage return on investment. If anyone needs any help identifying what the return on investment will be for them specifically, we can do that. We can do all of that. And if you just take that away and don't do anything with it, fine, that's absolutely fine. But at least ask, and ask us whilst you've got access to us. We're unbiased. We're not driven competitively. We don't get commission. So you really utilize us as much as you can. I really must implore that. I also, before we go on to questions, we've got 2 more sessions coming up. We really hope you all attend. If you don't attend from today, we will take it personally, and I might even blame Tom for you not coming in February. So, do you really want to put that on Tom? We try to make these topics relevant to what you want. Sometimes we hit them up, sometimes, we may not, but the sign-ups for these 2 events have been huge, in particular the March one on greenwashing. So many businesses have signed up to that. It has kind of stunned us, to be honest, and we recognise, we hear the businesses must be concerned, and we get why. So really, again, implore you, please sign up to them. We really wish to see you there. Right, questions. We've got 12 minutes. As I said, we're not going to run over. We had a great question in. We had a lot of activity, Tom. So I'll just head over to that. Yeah, okay. So we've got Helen asking, oh yeah, listed buildings, is there issues with heat pumps? I've just mentioned there that yes, unfortunately, it is a niggle, much like many interventions, solar, double glazing, insulation. There's so many things, isn't there, that you have to contend with, unfortunately. Legislation could change in this regard, we expect, but perhaps still several years until then. But yeah, a very important point. Helen also said she's had real win with simple insulation. Funded actually by supply and felt an instant benefit. Helen, we'd be really interested to know who that was with. Was it with us? I'm thinking now as I speak aloud. Was that with us, Helen, or was that separate funding?
No, that was separate funding from one of our large and quite green beer suppliers who have something called Planet First Locals, where you can pitch for £5,000 a year to spend on anything that's going to reduce your carbon footprint. So they have funded our insulation project. Yeah, so
it's fantastic, and I think it's kind of reflective of the industry you're in. It's quite a community industry, isn't it, that cares about the industry. How lovely. I guess it's worth others who are in their own industries actually doing a little investigation there, because whilst we are mindful of the bigger pots, the more general pots and those that we deliver, we are less aware of specialist funding opportunities. So where they exist, share them as well. Share them with the other businesses once you've taken advantage of them. Right. Oh, Helen's also asked. Helen's busy today. This is great, Helen. Can you run a biomass boiler off food waste? Very good question. I don't believe you can. However, what I would say is I do know that there's obviously a very strong market for anaerobic digesters. We used to support the purchase of them for micro digesters, effectively, that you can feed your food to. I think there's one called the Whale, which I only remember it because it's such a good name. It's good marketing, I guess, because it worked, didn't it? I'm mentioning them now. But yeah, they kind of take restaurant waste, convert it, and it creates a soil. It's difficult because it's all about the level of waste you have. I think that's a key element, is the amount of waste you have to feed it, because the bigger the digester, the better it will be, but you have to keep them operate. You've got to keep them moving. But it's a really interesting space, Alan. If you do anything there, we'd love to be part of that journey, just so that we could share it wider. So thank you, Helen. Tom, I had a question. One of the businesses has direct messaged me, so I'm not going to read out which business it is. You're welcome to shout up if you want to, but don't worry if not, because you've messaged me privately. They've effectively said, this has all been great. You've thrown a load of stuff at me there. They've asked, if they have a smaller team, where do you recommend they start their journey?
So if they have a very small team, they want to undertake.
Resources is limited. If they have limited focus, therefore, where do you think is the most impacting areas to go to first?
But of the parts that we covered, that they mentioned.
Anything in this the net zero agenda, Tom?
So I think definitely footprinting and finding out, establishing a baseline of what your emissions are is probably the first step to go. And places like NetZero Ngage, the SME Climate Hub, we've all got great resources for upskilling employees on that kind of thing. Yeah, and all free and available. Yeah,
I think I'd agree with Tom. I think the footprinting is a really strong element. We say if you can't capture it, you can't control it. It's pretty straightforward, right? It's much like a financial audit. If you don't do your accounts, you're not going to know. Until you do your accounts, you're not going to confidently be able to know what activity took place in the year. And this is very similar. The good thing is it's really practical, and Mike will tell you, after all the appointments he has with businesses, I read the feedback and everyone is saying it was much easier than I thought. It was much more practical than I thought. We do not cut corners. It's really thorough, and it is, you know, that level of thoroughness can match really what you want from it. And we're very transparent when we create your report in what's included and what's not. So absolutely, it's a great place to start. I would also throw on to Tom's recommendation there. Anything with the employees seems to be a hot topic at the moment. I think the ability to roll out general knowledge across the entire workforce can really help move the agenda along as a collective, rather than silos as we used to see within an organisation of a couple of people trying to change the entire organisation. Actually, if you can spread that message out, or at least open the conversation up to them and say, you know, tell us what you want, that might actually steer the direction that you head in. So thanks for that, Tom. We've got a couple more comments from Matthew. Yeah, thank you, Matthew, for your inputs. They've been really good. Matthew made a point earlier as well about ballast. Do you want to say hello, Matthew, aloud, if you're about?
Hi, good morning, everyone.
Hi, Matthew. So just remind me, Matthew, and for the room, where is it you're calling from?
I'm calling from UT Power. We're based in the Midlands. We're renewable energy specialists.
Oh, fantastic. I think you took one of our grants for an applicant. So fantastic to see, Matthew. The point you made, was I right about the ballast? Is that what you were referring to, that actually taking the full unit out if you're considering LEDs is most beneficial?
Yeah, so often people make the mistake of simply going to B&Q or somewhere, buying an LED bulb and thinking just screwing that bulb in, you will reap the full benefits of the savings. Behind the holding for the bulb, or the fitting, you have a driver that controls the amount of energy that's actually pushed through that bulb. So if that driver is set to put in a higher amount of energy for the traditional fluorescent bulb, and you're putting in an LED bulb, you can actually reduce the lifespan of the LED bulb, which typically should be around 50,000 hours. If you are putting too much energy through, you're actually wearing down the internal components of the LED bulb, and you're not reaping the full benefits of the savings. By having the fixture changed to meet the LED requirement, you're able to put less electricity through that fitting and the bulb, extend the lifespan of the bulb, and also reap the full benefits of the savings.
I understand. It's interesting. We used to have businesses approach us on low carbon who would say, you know, we've got this quote, and it would just be for the bulbs, and actually their lack of understanding there. And it almost feels tragic that a business could invest so much money and believe that they've got LEDs, have LEDs, but actually it's not the complete picture. And again, I think it highlights some of the worries that many of us have when we undertake these jobs, these interventions. It's not always about the money or, you know, the resource of the inconvenience. It can be actually, is what I'm being sold what I think I'm being sold? And that's been a theme around the environment as well. And it fits into greenwashing, and it limits people's want and confidence moving forward to undertake those projects. So thank you for that, Matthew. Really useful. You've added another comment there. I think we've got, if your building is listed, there's still a chance rooftop solar PV can be approved. Yes, we've had an applicant who did it. We can install solar tiles which mimic the appearance of slate tiles. Oh, that sounds very nice. I've seen Tesla ones similar to them. So I think it's in another element as well, is aesthetically people have this idea, don't they, that actually it has to be ugly, it has to be an eyesore. But as much as I think solar looks cool, I know not everyone does, but there you go. We've got new technologies always, haven't we, that are rolling out, and tiles on the roof. That sounds pretty good to me, Matthew. Thank you. So yes, I think we didn't have any other questions there. Thank you very much for those who sent them over, and thank you so much for those who we didn't lose many in the room. That's fantastic. That's great. We love you being here. We've got 2 QR codes on the screen. You can find us, you don't have to scan them, you can go on our website, but we have a collaboration circle on the right. That's a LinkedIn group that you can join. It's starting to get a lot more traction now. We've got 120, 30 members, something like that, and it's growing. It's a good space we're trying to build where you can continue this conversation. It's very informal. You can throw ideas out there, you can show off, you name it. That's the space to do it in. We've got some bright businesses in there. So if you throw a suggestion out there, you might find you pleasantly surprised with the results. So please join. But yes, we've got 3 appointments left for NetZero Engage. So I know Mike will be getting 3 emails or more shortly. So we look forward to them. If you need to, in the meantime, you know where we are. Please come to our next Power Hours. We really want to see you there. Yeah, have a fantastic Wednesday. And if there's no further questions, yep, go have another coffee. I think you've earned one.